Sorry, this table's for family only. My brother smirked, pointing me toward a fold-out chair. Right next to the trash can, everyone laughed as I sat alone, humiliated and silent. But what they did not know was that this night would be the last time I ever let them treat me like I did not belong. When the $3,200 bill landed in front of me, the waiter waited for my reaction. I just smiled and said, "Not my table." That was the moment everything changed. My name is Julia Marks. I am 26 years old, and if you asked anyone in my family about me, they would probably describe me as the quiet one, or worse, the invisible one. I was never the loudest, never the flashiest, and definitely never the favorite. That title had always belonged to my older brother, Ryan. Ryan was 30, tall, charismatic, and absolutely knew it. He walked through life like it owed him something, and most of the time, it seemed like the world agreed. My parents doted on him endlessly. Every sports trophy, every promotion, every half-baked idea he ever brought to the dinner table was met with applause and praise. No one showed up for that, by the way. They were too busy. Still, I never caused a fuss. I was raised to be polite, to not make waves. But life has a strange way of pushing you to the edge until one day, you stop treading lightly and start stomping. It all started with Ryan's engagement party. He was marrying the kind of woman who belonged on a reality show. Her name was Brielle. She had extensions down to her waist, spoke in hashtags, and looked me up and down every time we were in the same room. I had received a very formal invitation to the party, sent via email, even though everyone else apparently got hand-delivered cards with calligraphy. That should have been my first red flag. The venue was a high-end Italian restaurant downtown, the kind of place with velvet ropes and valet parking. When I walked in, wearing a modest blue dress and carrying a small gift bag, I immediately noticed I was overdressed in modesty and underdressed in flash. Every woman there looked like they were attending a Hollywood red carpet. And there I was, the black and white print in a room full of neon. I tried not to take it personally. I walked over to the hostess, gave her my name, and she nodded politely before leading me through the candle-lit room filled with laughter and clinking glasses. As we approached the private dining section, I could already hear Ryan's booming voice. My parents were there, of course. So were Brielle's parents, her 3 sisters, and at least 4 of Ryan's college buddies I barely recognized. I took a deep breath and stepped inside. Ryan spotted me immediately and raised his eyebrow with a smirk. I smiled awkwardly and lifted my hand in a small wave. Before I could speak, he gestured toward an empty chair. Not at the main table, not even near it. It was a fold-out chair tucked next to a supply station and a trash can. He said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Sorry, this table is for family only." A few people chuckled. Someone even snorted. I froze. He leaned closer to me and added with a wink, "But hey, that chair over there is perfect. Great view of the exit." My heart fell, but I forced a smile. I did not want to cry. Not here. Not in front of these people. I walked slowly to the fold-out chair, sat down alone, and tried to focus on the flickering can light instead of the laughter behind me. The waiter brought me a menu that looked like it was printed on gold leaf paper. I declined to order anything and said I was not feeling hungry. For nearly an hour, I sat there listening to stories about Ryan's glory days. No one came over to talk to me. Not my parents. Not even Ryan's fiancé. It was like I was not even there. Then something happened. The waiter returned with a polished leather binder and placed it in front of me. He cleared his throat and said, "Ma'am, the total comes to $3,200. My eyes widened. I looked up at him. He was not joking. The room quieted. Everyone turned toward me. Ryan grinned, sipping his wine. "Come on, Julia," he said. "You're the one who always budgets. Time to put those math skills to use." There was a flicker of something cruel in his eyes. I looked at the waiter, then at the binder, then back at my brother. Slowly, I stood up. I reached for the bill, lifted it carefully, and looked the waiter dead in the eye. With the calmest voice I could manage, I said, "Not my table." Then I set the binder back down, smiled politely, and walked away without another word. What they did not know was that I had been planning for this moment for months. As I stepped out of the restaurant, I could still hear the murmurs and confused voices behind me. My heels clicked softly against the stone pavement, but my heart was thudding like a drum. Not from fear, from the thrill. For the first time in years, I did not feel like the invisible sibling. I felt like the storm. When I got to my car, I sat in silence for a moment, letting the adrenaline settle. I did not even start the engine. I just stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My cheeks were flushed, my lips trembling slightly, but my eyes were clear. I had never walked away from my family before. I had never stood up to Ryan. But now that I had, it felt like a dam had burst. The next morning, my phone buzzed nonstop. Missed calls from mom. A couple of texts from my cousin Josh that just said, "Wow, and are you okay?" And then there was a long voicemail from Ryan that started calm but eventually turned into a sarcastic rant about me being dramatic and selfish for bailing on the check. But what really caught me off guard was a message from Brielle's younger sister, Cassidy. We had never spoken before, aside from polite hellos at family gatherings. Her message was short but strange. "You did the right thing. Trust me, there is more going on than you know. Can we talk?" I was tempted to ignore it. Drama was the last thing I wanted. But something about her wording stayed with me, so I agreed to meet her for coffee that afternoon. Cassidy arrived in a sweatshirt and jeans, her hair pulled back in a bun, no makeup, completely different from the Instagram perfect look she usually wore around her family. She ordered a plain latte and sat across from me with a tired expression. She did not waste time. "I know Ryan seems charming to most people," she said, "but you are not the only one he treats like garbage. He is worse with people who cannot talk back." I blinked. "What do you mean?" Cassidy looked down, then said quietly, "I work at the venue where your brother and Brielle are having their wedding. Last week, I overheard Ryan talking to one of the managers. He was bragging about how he convinced your parents to pay for the whole wedding. Then he said, 'I even made my sister think she was not invited to the rehearsal dinner. Watch how fast she shows up when the spotlight turns on.'" My stomach turned. Cassidy continued, "He said you were a ghost with a wallet, that he could humiliate you as much as he wanted and you would still show up, just to be part of the family." I stared at her, stunned. I had always felt the subtle jabs, the side eyes, the emotional distance, but hearing it spoken out loud like some kind of game he had been playing made everything sharper. Then she added, "He also asked one of the planners if he could keep your name off the official guest list. Said it would be hilarious if the staff thought you were crashing." I leaned back in my chair. The restaurant, the fold-out chair, the fake smile on his face. It had all been choreographed. Cassidy looked embarrassed. I should have said something sooner, but I figured. Family stuff, you know? Still, when I saw what you did with the bill, I realized maybe you were not the one being manipulated anymore. I thanked her for telling me, but as I drove home, my thoughts raced. If this was just the surface, what else had been orchestrated behind my back? I went digging. I pulled out old emails, group texts, even financial records. Over the years, there had been dozens of small transactions from my parents' joint account, things Ryan claimed were emergencies or reimbursements. But the totals painted a different picture. Over $40,000 had gone to him in the last 2 years alone. All quietly, all without question. I also discovered that the vacation I had declined 2 summers ago was not something I had ever actually been invited to. My mother had told me, "You were too busy to come anyway." But I found an email she had forwarded to Ryan, not me, confirming 6 flight tickets. My name was not on any of them. I was not just forgotten. I was erased. Instead of spiraling, I decided to plan. Ryan's wedding was in 2. It was going to be huge, over 200 guests, a rented mansion by the lake, live music, custom cakes, and even a drone photographer. But what Ryan did not know was that I had recently taken a job at a large cybersecurity firm. My title was low-level, data analyst, but my access was deep. And I had spent the past year learning everything about digital footprints. I knew things about Ryan that even he had forgotten. 2 nights before the wedding, I sent a single email to Brielle. It had one sentence: "You deserve to know who you are marrying." Attached for screenshots, dozens of them. Private messages, dating profiles under fake names, time-stamped GPS logs, even recordings from social media burner accounts he had used to flirt with multiple women across the last 6 months. I did not hear back from her, but I knew she read it. The next day, Ryan called me. He sounded panicked, desperate, and angry all at once. "Did you seriously just try to destroy my life?" he barked. I replied calmly, "No, I just reminded someone of the truth." There was silence. Then he hung up. The morning of the wedding, the skies were clear and everything was set. But when the guests arrived, there was no music playing, no decoration, no catering, and no bride. The guests started arriving at the lakefront venue around 11. Some had driven in from out of state. Others flew in from the east. Everyone was dressed to the nines, buzzing with anticipation for what was supposed to be the perfect wedding day. But the closer they got to the mansion's doors, the more confused they looked. The main gates were open, but no valet was in sight. The sound of music was absent. No string quartet, no DJ, just birds and silence. At first, people assumed they were early. But as time passed, whispers spread quickly. The inside of the mansion was nearly empty. Tables were set up, yes, but there were no centerpieces, no food, no drinks. The bartender was missing. A confused photographer stood near the stage with no idea what to do. Then someone asked the question no one wanted to answer. Where was the bride? Ryan eventually appeared at the top of the steps, wearing his designer tux, hair slicked back, and sweat beading on his forehead. He tried to put on his usual confident face, but his eyes gave him away. People approached him. First his groomsmen, then family friends, and finally our parents. My mother pulled him aside, looking frantic. Still, no one had seen Brielle. 10 more minutes passed. Then someone from Brielle's family received a message on their phone and gasped. A bridesmaid stepped forward, holding up her phone. Brielle just sent this. She read it out loud, and the entire crowd went silent. I will not be marrying a man who lies, cheats, manipulates, and disrespects his own family. I wish you all the best, but I deserve better. A few gasps. One woman let out a quiet, "Oh my God." Ryan's face turned red. Not the kind of red from embarrassment, but from fury. His jaw clenched. His fists balled at his sides. Someone asked him, "Is it true?" He turned and walked back inside the mansion without answering. Meanwhile, I stood across the lawn, by the trees, far enough to not be noticed, but close enough to watch the entire scene unfold. I wore a navy dress, simple and sharp. I had no plans to approach the guests or confront anyone. I had done what I needed to do. But it was not over. Later that evening, while most of the guests left quietly and awkwardly, I received a text from Brielle. It said, "Thank you." That was all. I assumed Ryan would hide for a while, maybe flee the country to avoid the humiliation. But he surprised me. 3 days later, he showed up at my apartment. I heard the knock, looked through the peephole, and debated even opening the door. But curiosity got the better of me. When I did, he stood there with a bruised ego and eyes full of rage. He pushed past me without asking. "You ruined my wedding," he said. I closed the door behind him calmly. "No, Ryan, you ruined your own wedding. I just made sure everyone else knew the truth." He turned toward me. "You are jealous. You always have been. Just because I get more attention." I interrupted. "This is not about attention. This is about how you treat people." He scoffed. "You sat in that corner your whole life, never saying anything. Why now?" I looked him straight in the eyes. "Because I finally realized silence is not kindness. It is surrender. And I am done surrendering to people who use me like a punching bag." He stared at me, stunned. For the first time, I saw it, the crack in his armor. Not anger, not arrogance, just confusion, maybe even fear. He left without another word. But the fallout did not stop there. That same week, my parents called me, separately. My father asked to talk things out. My mother, more prideful, tried to frame it as a misunderstanding. Neither of them truly apologized. But it became clear that the pedestal Ryan stood on had started to wobble. And without the grand wedding to mask everything, they were left confronting a much uglier truth. They had enabled him, and they had ignored me. Meanwhile, Brielle released a carefully worded statement on social media, thanking friends for their support and confirming that the wedding had been called off due to irreconcilable differences. She did not name Ryan. She did not need to. What surprised me most, however, was the message I received from one of Ryan's old college friends, Devin. He said, "Hey, I know this is random, but I always noticed how differently Ryan treated you compared to how he bragged about you to us. He used to say you were smarter than everyone else in the family. Quiet, but dangerous." Guess he was right. I asked, "Why are you telling me this now?" His reply, "Because sometimes the people in the shadows are the ones who end up running the show." I did not know whether he meant it as a compliment or a warning. But either way, I had no intention of going back into the shadows. In the following weeks, I blocked Ryan's number. I went no contact with my parents for the first time in my life. And I began to pour my energy into myself, not into proving my worth to people who would never see it. Until one day, I got a call from a number I did not recognize. I let it go to voicemail. It was from the Italian restaurant. "Hello, Ms. Marks. I just wanted to inform you that your brother's payment on the $3,200 bill was declined. Since you were listed as the point of contact, we need to confirm." I smiled to myself and hung up before listening to the rest. He had tried to push the bill on me after all. But the truth was, I had already spoken to the restaurant manager after that night. I had sent them copies of the guest list, seating arrangements, and the footage of Ryan telling me to sit by the trash can. They had waived me from any responsibility. And this time, when the waiter asked who the bill belonged to, the answer was clear. It was his table, and he could pay for it himself. 3 weeks after the wedding disaster, I was invited to speak at a Women in Tech panel downtown. It was nothing major, just a local event hosted by one of the startups I had collaborated with during my internship days, but it felt important. It was the first time I was asked to speak about me, not about Ryan, not about my family, just me. I wore a simple blazer, navy slacks, no dramatic makeup, no need to impress anyone. And yet, when I walked on stage and saw the small crowd clapping, I felt more seen than I ever had at any family gathering. After my panel, a woman came up to me with a card in her hand. She was a recruiter for a Fortune 500 tech firm, and she had been in the audience. "We are hiring for a director of data risk," she said. "You seem like someone who understands control and how to take it back." I was stunned. I went home that evening and sat on my couch looking at the business card. I had spent so much of my life shrinking to fit the spaces my family allowed me. But now the world was opening, not because I demanded it, but because I had finally stopped asking for permission. That weekend, Ryan showed up again. I was not surprised. His life had started unraveling. Brielle had posted a video titled, "What I Wish I Knew Before Saying Yes." And while she did not mention names, everyone could connect the dots. Ryan's reputation was taking hits. Some of his groomsmen had stopped answering his calls. Even our parents had become distant, especially after learning about the money trail and the messages I had shown them, proof that Ryan had lied to them repeatedly while painting himself as the golden child. He stood on my doorstep with a box in his hand. His face looked gaunt. He was not wearing his usual fitted shirts and watches. This time, he looked like someone who had been humbled. "I wanted to return this," he said. Inside the box was the gift I had brought to his engagement party. Unopened, still wrapped. "I never even opened it," he added. I looked at the box, then at him. "You can keep it." He stared at me, defeated. "Why are you doing this?" I tilted my head. "Doing what?" He ran his hands through his hair, clearly overwhelmed. "Making me the villain. Destroying my name. Tearing everything apart." I kept my voice calm. "Ryan, you were never the victim. You just always had a good PR team, our parents." He looked down. For a long time, he said nothing. Then he mumbled, "I do not know who I am without all of it." That was the first honest thing I had ever heard him say. I nodded. "Then maybe it is time you figure that out." He left. He did not slam the door. He did not shout. He just walked away. 2 days later, I accepted the job offer. My starting salary would be nearly double what I had been earning, and they were relocating me to Chicago. A fresh start. No family dinners. No fold-out chairs. No one pretending I was invisible. Before leaving, I donated the engagement gift to a women's shelter thrift store. It was a delicate handmade photo frame with a quote on it. "Family is who stands by you when the world turns away." Fitting, really. Because I had finally realized something important. Family is not about blood. It is about who sees you, values you, and shows up for you. None of that applied to the people I used to bend over backwards for. On my last night in town, I received one more text, this time from my father. It said, "We are sorry. We know we failed. If you ever want to come back home, we will be better." I read it twice. Then I turned off my phone and slipped it into my purse. I did not reply. As the plane lifted off the next morning, I looked out the window and felt something unexpected. Relief. Freedom. Power. I remembered the smirk on Ryan's face that night in the restaurant. The laughter. the trash can beside me, the bill. And I remembered the way the waiter looked at me, confused, hoping I would take responsibility for a table I was never truly welcome at. But I had smiled, because I knew something none of them had figured out yet. Sometimes, walking away is the loudest thing you can ever do. And sometimes, not sitting at the table is exactly how you reclaim your worth. They laughed when she sat alone, but they were silent when the truth stood up. Never let anyone decide your worth, because sometimes not fighting for a seat at the wrong table is the biggest win of all. Subscribe for more real, emotional stories that hit deep.